The subway car hummed softly, its lights flickering like a heartbeat. I was alone, or so I thought, until I saw him, sitting at the far end, staring straight ahead. He didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, a shadow in a gray coat, as if he'd been waiting for me all along. It was late November in Chicago, 2022, and I was working nights at a diner near the Loop. The Red Line was my lifeline, carrying me home to Rogers Park after midnight shifts that left me smelling of grease and coffee. The trains were usually empty that late, just me and the occasional drunk or night shift worker, all of us too tired to make eye contact. I liked it that way. The quiet let me think, let me scroll through my phone or listen to music without the world pressing in. That night, I clocked out around 1:15 a.m., my feet aching from 8 hours on concrete. The air outside was sharp, the kind of cold that bites through your jacket. I hurried down the steps to the Jackson station, my breath clouding in front of me. The platform was deserted, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. I checked my phone, 1:22 a.m. The train was due in 3 minutes. When it pulled in, I stepped into the third car from the front. Same as always, the doors hissed shut and the train lurched forward. I settled into a seat near the middle, popped in my earbuds, and opened a podcast about urban legends. The host was droning on about haunted bridges when I felt it, a prickle on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I glanced up, expecting nothing, but there he was. He sat at the far end of the car, near the door to the next carriage. A man, maybe in his 40s, in a long gray coat. His face was half hidden by a wool scarf, but his eyes were locked on the space in front of him, unblinking. His hands rested on his knees, fingers curled tightly, like he was gripping something invisible. I couldn't tell if he'd been there when I boarded. The car had seemed empty, but I hadn't been paying attention. I shifted in my seat, trying to shake the unease. He wasn't looking at me, just staring at nothing, but something about him felt wrong, too still, too quiet. I turned up my podcast and focused on my phone, scrolling through notifications to distract myself. The train rattled on, stopping at Roosevelt, then Cermak Chinatown. No one got on or off, just me and him. By the time we reached Fullerton, the feeling hadn't gone away. It was heavier now, like a weight pressing on my chest. I stole another glance at him. He hadn't moved, not an inch. His scarf had slipped slightly, revealing a sharp jawline and pale skin, but his eyes were still fixed on that empty spot. The train doors opened, then closed. No one else got on. I checked the time, 1:38 a.m. My stop, Loyola, was next. The train slowed as it approached the station. I stood, grabbing the pole to steady myself. And that's when I heard it, a low whisper, so faint I thought it was my earbuds at first. Clara Reese, March 12, 1994. My name, my birth date, spoken like a fact, clear and cold, right behind me. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. The car was empty. The man was gone. I scanned every seat, every corner. Nothing, just the hum of the train and the flicker of the lights. The doors opened at Loyola, and I stumbled onto the platform, my breath ragged. It was empty, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete. I stood there, frozen, waiting for the whisper to come again. It didn't. I hurried up the stairs to the street, my sneakers slapping against the steps. The cold hit me like a slap, but I didn't slow down until I reached my apartment building. I fumbled with my keys, got inside, and locked the door behind me. My roommate Jess was asleep, her door closed. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the couch in the dark, replaying the whisper in my head. Clara Reese, March 12th, 1994. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a mistake. Someone knew me. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The whisper clung to me, sharp and real, no matter how many times I told myself I'd misheard. I thought about telling Jess, but stopped myself. She'd think I was overtired, maybe even high. I didn't blame her. It sounded crazy even to me. Instead, I called my brother Nate, who lived in Evanston. He was the only person I trusted not to laugh. "You sure it wasn't some creep messing with you?" he asked, his voice crackly over the phone. "No one was there, Nate. I checked. The car was empty." He went quiet for a moment. "Maybe you were half asleep. You work those late shifts, Clara. Your brain could've." "I know what I heard," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. "It wasn't in my head." Okay, he said, softening. "Look, just take an Uber tonight, all right? Or I'll pick you up. Don't ride the train for a bit." I agreed, mostly to get him off my back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that avoiding the train wouldn't fix this. Whatever it was, it felt personal, specific, like it had been waiting for me. That night, I took an Uber to work and back. The driver was chatty, talking about the Bears game, and I nodded along, barely listening. My eyes kept darting to the windows, half expecting to see that man in the gray coat standing on a corner, watching. He wasn't there. The streets were just streets, empty, cold, normal. For 2 days, I avoided the red line. I told myself it was over, that it was a one-time thing. But curiosity is a poison. It seeps in, makes you reckless. By Wednesday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to know if it would happen again. I needed to know if he was real. I left the diner at 1:10 a.m. and walked to the Jackson station. The platform was empty again, the air heavy with that same damp concrete smell. When the train pulled in, I stepped into the third car, just like before. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to sit down and act normal. I put in one earbud, but kept the other out, listening. The car was empty. No man in a gray coat, no whispers, just the rattle of the train and the faint hum of my music. We passed Roosevelt, then Cermak, Chinatown. I started to relax, my shoulders loosening. Maybe I had imagined it. Terrified, I bolted up the stairs, my pulse racing so fast I could feel it in my throat. The platform was empty. No one behind me, no one at all. But the voice was still echoing in my head, clear as a bell. Elliot Grant, September 17th, 1996. You were never supposed to be here. I ran, my sneakers pounding the steps, and didn't stop until I was safe inside my apartment. Every lock turned, my back pressed against the door. A fear didn't leave me that night. It settled deep, like a splinter under the skin. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying the whisper, the figure on the platform, the impossible way he knew my name and birth date. I didn't tell anyone, not my roommate, not my friends. How do you explain something that sounds like it crawled out of a nightmare? Instead, I went back to my routine, pretending it didn't happen. Work, home, repeat. I told myself it was a one-time thing. A trick of the mind, but I knew better. That kind of fear doesn't lie. Thursday night, it happened again. I was on the same train, same car, stepping off at my stop around 1 a.m. The platform was empty, the air heavy with that damp, metallic subway smell. I felt it before I saw him, a pressure, like the air itself was watching me. I scanned the platform, and there he was across the tracks. A man in a long black coat, standing perfectly still, his head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. His face was shadowed, but I could feel his eyes, sharp and unblinking. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a silhouette burned into the dim light. I didn't wait to see more. I ran, taking the stairs 3 at a time, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't stop until I was inside my apartment. Every lock clicked, my breath ragged in the dark. The next day, I took an Uber home. I couldn't face the train, not yet, but the questions wouldn't stop. Who was he? How did he know me? I searched online for Elliot Grant, September 17, 1996, hoping for answers. Nothing. Just random noise, obituaries, LinkedIn profiles, none of them me. I called my mom, asked if she'd ever shared my full name or birth date online. She hadn't, and her confusion only made me feel worse. I lied, told her I was fine. But every creak in the apartment, every distant footstep, felt like it was coming for me. His face, or the lack of it, stayed in my mind, a blank space where features should have been. 2 days later, I stayed out late with a friend near Prospect Park. I didn't tell her why I didn't want to go home alone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Around 1:20 a.m., she offered to call me a ride. I said no. Maybe I was testing myself, proving I wasn't losing it. Maybe I needed to know if he'd come back. I took the train, same route, same car. The silence was deafening as we neared my stop. I stepped onto the platform, ears straining for that whisper. Nothing at first, just the hum of electricity and a faint clicking from a sign above. Then I heard it. Footsteps, light and uneven, like bare feet on tile. I turned. No one. The platform was empty, but the sound was close. Too close. I jogged toward the stairs, my pulse spiking, and then it came again. Elliot Grant, September 17th, 1996. You were never supposed to be here. The last sentence hit like a punch. The voice wasn't human, too smooth, too hollow, like it came from somewhere deeper than a throat. I ran harder, sprinting 2 blocks from the station, checking over my shoulder every few steps. The street was empty, but I wasn't alone. I could feel it. When I got home, my apartment was untouched, except for my laptop. I'd left it closed on my desk. Now it was open, the screen black, except for a single notepad file titled 1996. Inside, 4 words, I see you now. No signs of a break-in, nothing stolen. I moved out a week later. New number, new apartment, new borough. I haven't ridden the subway since, but sometimes I hear footsteps outside my door, too slow to be casual. I hear whispers in the dark, just as I'm falling asleep. In my dreams, he's there, across the tracks, watching, waiting for me to say his name. The diner was busier the next night, the clatter of plates and chatter drowning out my thoughts. I didn't tell anyone about the train, not my coworkers, not my brother. But I couldn't stop checking the windows, half expecting to see him outside, that gray coat blending into the shadows. I took an Uber home again, the driver's small talk a faint hum against my racing thoughts. The city felt different now, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to slip up. Friday night, I couldn't avoid it anymore. I had to know. I left work at 1:05 a.m. and walked to the Jackson station. The platform was empty, the buzz of the lights louder than I remembered. I boarded the 3rd car, sat in the same seat, and kept my earbuds out, every sense on high alert. The train moved smoothly, no delays, no whispers. I almost let myself believe it was over. Then, at Fullerton, the lights flickered, just for a second, but enough to make my stomach drop. When they came back on, he was there, same seat, same gray coat, same unblinking stare at the empty space in front of him. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The train stopped at Belmont, and he stood, slow and deliberate, and walked toward the door. As he passed, he turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his face, or where his face should have been. It was smooth, featureless, like a mannequin's. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched tight over nothing. The doors opened, and he stepped out, vanishing into the platform's shadows. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, lights on, searching my name and birth date again. Still nothing, but I found something else. A forum post, buried deep in a thread about Chicago's haunted history. A user named NoFace94 had written about the Red Line, claiming a silent passenger appeared to certain riders, always at night, always knowing their names and birth dates. The post was from 2019, 3 years before my first encounter. The user said the passenger only appeared to those who weren't supposed to be here. No explanation, just a warning. Don't look at him. Don't speak to him. He'll follow you home. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking. The phrase kept looping in my head. You were never supposed to be here. What did it mean? Was it about me? My life? My choices? I thought about my move to Chicago, the diner job, the late-night commutes. Had I made a wrong turn somewhere? Stepped into a life that wasn't mine? The next night, I stayed late at the diner, volunteering for cleanup to avoid the train. My manager, Tony, noticed I was off. "You good, Clara?" he asked, wiping down the counter. I nodded, muttered something about being tired, but my eyes kept flicking to the door. I took an Uber home, but when I got to my apartment, something was wrong. My keys felt heavier in my pocket, like they didn't belong there. Inside, everything was normal, except for a single photo on my kitchen table. It was me, standing on the Jackson platform, taken from across the tracks. I was alone, but in the background, barely visible, was a smudge of gray. A coat, no face. I called Nate, my voice shaking as I told him everything. He didn't laugh this time. "Clara, you need to get out of there," he said. "Come stay with me, now." I packed a bag and left that night, taking a cab to Evanston. Nate's apartment was small but warm, a stark contrast to the cold dread I'd been carrying. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me a blanket and pointed to the couch. I didn't sleep, though. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, felt like him. The next morning, I found something in my bag, a folded piece of paper I hadn't packed. My name was written on it, Clara Reese, in handwriting that wasn't mine, but looked like it was trying to be. Below it, my birth date, March 12th, 1994, and one more line, "You can't leave." I showed it to Nate, who went pale. "This wasn't here yesterday," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't argue, just took the paper and tore it into pieces, tossing them in the trash. But we both knew it didn't matter. He'd found me again. I stayed with Nate for a week, jumping at every shadow, every sound. I stopped going to work, called in sick, and ignored Tony's worried texts. Nate suggested I see a therapist, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. How do you tell someone a faceless man is following you, whispering things he shouldn't know? I started researching more, digging into Chicago's history, subway legends, anything that might explain him. I found stories of missing commuters, people who vanished on late-night trains, their names and birth dates found scrawled on scraps of paper in empty stations. None of it made sense, but it felt too close to be coincidence. One night, I dreamed of him. I was on the Red Line, alone, the car stretching endlessly in both directions. He sat across from me, featureless, his coat gray as ash. He didn't speak, but I felt the words in my head. You were never supposed to be here. I woke up gasping, Nate shaking my shoulders. You were screaming, he said, his eyes wide. I didn't tell him what I'd seen. I couldn't. The next day, I went back to my apartment to grab the rest of my things. I didn't want to, but I needed clothes, my laptop, some semblance of my life. The building felt wrong, like the air was too thick, the lights too dim. My apartment was untouched, except for my bedroom mirror. Written in what looked like ash, smudged but clear, were the words, I see you now. I grabbed my bag and left, my hands trembling so badly I dropped my keys twice. I moved to a new city a month later, Milwaukee, close enough to visit Nate, but far from the red line. I got a new job, a new number, a new life, but it followed me. Not every night, not every day, but enough. A whisper in a crowded bar, my name and birth date spoken softly, like a secret. A figure in a gray coat standing across the street. Gone when I blinked. A note slipped under my door, my handwriting but not mine. You can't leave. I don't ride trains anymore. I don't walk alone at night. But I know he's there, waiting. I can feel him in the quiet moments, in the flicker of a streetlight, in the reflection of a window that isn't quite mine. I don't know what he wants, or why I was never supposed to be here. But I know one thing for sure. He sees me now, and he's not going away.